Have you ever seen someone sitting alone on an old concrete step, holding a cup of cold tea, dressed in simple clothes, yet their eyes carry a strange kind of peace? Meanwhile, there are people who own big houses, luxury cars, dream-level success, yet at night they still lie awake, unable to sleep. This paradox can leave us confused. Why is it that the more we have, the more we seem to feel something is missing? We grow up believing that happiness lies ahead. When we achieve this, we'll be happy. When we own that, we'll feel fulfilled. When everything goes our way, we'll be at peace. And so we run, faster, more, farther. But there comes a moment when you stop and realize you've touched many things you once dreamed of, and your heart still feels empty. Not because you lack something, perhaps because you've been searching for happiness in the wrong direction. The simple but difficult truth is this: happiness does not come from getting more. It comes from accepting reality as it is and letting go of attachment to how things must unfold. We rarely realize that most of our suffering does not come from what happens, but from our inner reaction to what happens. Rain does not make us suffer. Rain falling when we wanted sunshine is what irritates us. A piece of feedback does not wound us. The belief that they shouldn't have said that to me is what hurts. A change of plans does not break us. Resisting reality is what exhausts us. Does this feel familiar? Think back to the last time you truly suffered. Not just pain, but that heavy feeling lingering in your mind. If you look closely, you'll often find a quiet sentence inside. This shouldn't have happened. Life was supposed to be different. Things must go my way. It is this resistance to reality that creates tension. Reality is like a river. When we fight against it, we grow tired. When we learn to loosen and flow with it, we realize we no longer need to fight. I once knew a friend who worked for years to reach his dream position. The day he received the promotion letter, he thought he would finally be happy. But only a few months later, pressure, responsibility, and fear of failure made him more tense than ever. One evening, he said to me, "Maybe the problem isn't the job. Maybe it's that I always think everything has to be perfect." The moment he stopped trying to force everything to match the ideal image in his head, he began to feel lighter. The job was the same, the pressure was the same, but he was no longer fighting reality. And that was when peace began to appear. We often think acceptance means giving up. But in truth, acceptance is not abandoning effort. Acceptance is stopping the fight against what has already happened and what is happening, so we have the energy to face it clearly. When you accept that a day is imperfect, you can still live it fully. When you accept that others are not who you expected them to be, you begin to truly love them. When you accept that life is always changing, you stop fearing the future. You do not become passive. You become free. Imagine clenching your fist tightly for hours. At first, you don't notice, but the longer you hold it, the more it aches. When you finally open your hand, relief comes instantly. Life is the same. We clench expectations, control, and fear for so long that we forget we can let go. Letting go is not losing. Letting go is freeing yourself. And when we stop resisting reality, something strange happens. Peace is no longer something we have to search for. It was there all along, only covered by the resistance in our minds. Maybe you are still facing difficulties. Maybe life is not unfolding the way you hoped. But in this very moment, if you pause, take a deep breath, and allow everything to be as it is, you may feel a very subtle stillness arise, not because the problem disappears, but because you are no longer fighting it. And in that stillness, peace begins to take root. Perhaps happiness was never somewhere far away. Perhaps it appears the moment we stop trying to force life to become something else. Just stop resisting. Just accept. Just let go gently. And you will realize peace has always been here. Why are modern people still unhappy? One late evening, Min sat alone in his fully furnished apartment in a city glowing with lights. His phone kept lighting up with work notifications, messages from friends, unread emails. Everything was modern, convenient, instantly connected. And yet, in that quiet room, he felt an emptiness he couldn't quite name. If life today is easier than ever before, why do so many people still feel so exhausted? We can order food with a single tap. We can talk to someone on the other side of the planet within seconds. We can access nearly all human knowledge from the phone in our pocket. Things that were once considered miracles have now become normal. And yet anxiety is rising. Depression is rising. Emotional burnout has become a familiar state. Is life missing something? Or are we searching in the wrong place? Min used to believe that once he reached a management position, he would finally feel fulfilled. He worked relentlessly for 10 years. Late nights, weekends missing family birthdays, vacations replaced by reports and strategic plans. The day he received the promotion, everyone congratulated him. His family felt proud. His friends admired him. But that night, alone in his quiet room, he noticed something strange. The emptiness was still there. Not long after, a new goal appeared. Higher income, bigger projects, better reputation, and the cycle continued. Perhaps you have experienced this too. We always think happiness lies ahead. In the next achievement, the next purchase, the better version of ourselves in the future. But when we finally get what we want, the joy lasts only a short while, and then the mind begins demanding more. The Buddha saw this more than 2,500 years ago. He did not say that material success or achievement is wrong. He simply realized that suffering appears when we believe happiness depends on reality unfolding according to our will. Look back at the moments that hurt you the most. A relationship ended, but you wanted it to continue. A job rejection, even though you believed you deserved it. A careless comment, and you felt deeply offended. The event happened in a moment, but the pain may last for weeks, months, even years. What keeps the pain alive for so long? Not the event, but the resistance to the event. Min remembers his college relationship. When it ended, he did not only suffer because he lost someone he loved. He suffered because he believed this should not have happened. He repeated the question over and over. Why me? He imagined alternative scenarios. He clung to the memories as if holding on to them could somehow change the past. The initial pain was natural, but the resistance turned it into prolonged suffering. We often do not realize that our mind is constantly arguing with reality. This is not fair. This shouldn't be happening. Things were supposed to be different. Every time we resist what has already occurred, we create inner tension. Imagine trying to push a river backward with your hands. The harder you push, the more the water keeps flowing. And you are the only one who grows tired. Life works the same way. Min realized that most of his stress did not come from work itself, but from the belief that everything had to unfold according to a perfect plan. When a project changed, he felt tense. When an employee made a mistake, he felt disappointed. When a plan was delayed, he felt irritated. Not because those things were catastrophic, but because they did not match the expectations in his head. One day, After a major project was unexpectedly canceled, he sat quietly for a long time. For the first time, he did not resist. He did not complain. He did not blame himself. He simply sighed and thought, "All right, this is happening." Strangely, instead of collapsing, he felt lighter. The situation had not changed, but the resistance inside him had softened. Do you see yourself in this story? We often believe happiness will come when everything becomes perfect, but life is not perfect. And when we demand that it be perfect, we place ourselves in a state of constant disappointment. Perhaps the problem is not life. Perhaps the problem is our expectation of life. When we want reality to be different, we suffer. When we allow reality to be what it is, a gentle space begins to appear. That does not mean we stop trying. It simply means we stop fighting what has already happened. And in that small, quiet space, we begin to feel something we had not noticed before. Peace does not come from everything going our way, but from no longer insisting that it must. Modern life may offer convenience, but inner peace does not come from technology, achievement, or comfort. It comes from our relationship with reality. When Min began accepting that not everything had to go according to plan, he did not become lazy. On the contrary, he became calmer, clearer, and less exhausted. He still worked, he still set goals, he still tried. But he no longer placed his happiness in the outcome. And that made all the difference. Perhaps we do not need more to be happy. Perhaps we simply need to stop resisting what is happening. And when resistance settles, the mind settles with it. In that settling, we begin to understand peace was never far away. We were simply too busy arguing with reality to notice it. Suffering comes from clinging. Have you ever felt tired, even on a day when you did nothing physically exhausting? Not a bodily fatigue, but a heaviness inside, as if you were carrying something invisible all day long. Min once thought it was simply work pressure. But there were weekends with no deadlines, no meetings, and still he felt drained. He slept longer. He scrolled on his phone more, yet the heaviness inside did not disappear. One afternoon, sitting quietly in his familiar cafe, he suddenly realized his body was resting, but his mind had never stopped. Perhaps you know this feeling too. You are washing dishes, but your mind is replaying an uncomfortable conversation from 3 days ago. You're driving, but inside, you're worrying about next month's bills. You're lying down to rest, but your mind replays a mistake from years ago. You are in the present, but your mind is everywhere else. We carry so many invisible things, memories that hurt us, worries about things that have not happened, resentments we have not released, nameless fears about the future. The strange part is that most of these things do not exist in the present moment. They are over, or they have not yet happened. Yet, the mind holds on to them as if they are happening right now. Buddhism calls this clinging, not simply remembering, not simply thinking, but gripping tightly, holding on, not allowing things to pass. It is like clenching an object in your hand for so long that your hand begins to ache. Yet you do not realize you could simply let go. Min realized he was clinging more than he thought. He was still holding on to a harsh comment from his boss 2 years ago. He still remembered the feeling of betrayal from an old friendship. He still worried about situations that had never actually happened. Those things were no longer present in his life, but they were present in his mind every single day. And each time they appeared, his body reacted as if the threat were happening now. His heart beat faster, his shoulders tightened, his breath became shallow, The mind does not distinguish clearly between memory and present reality. It simply reacts. There is a famous Zen story. Two monks were walking through a forest when they encountered a young woman standing by a river, afraid to cross because of the strong current. The older monk immediately carried her across, set her down on the other side, and continued walking. Hours later, the younger monk finally spoke up. "You broke your vows. We are not supposed to touch women." The older monk smiled and replied, "I put her down hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" That sentence is like a mirror reflecting our lives. We carry things that ended long ago. An ex-partner left years ago, yet we still carry them in our mind. An insult from childhood still echoes inside. A missed opportunity still weighs on us. The event is over, but we continue carrying it. Min remembers meeting the old friend who once hurt him. The other person spoke normally, as if everything had been forgotten. But inside Min, the old emotions rose up as if it had just happened yesterday, and he suddenly understood. The other person had put the story down long ago. The one still carrying it was him. We often think we are hurt by the past, but many times we are hurt by our refusal to put the past down. The same happens with the future. You may be worrying about a meeting that has not yet taken place, a result that has not been announced, a scenario that has never occurred. Your body reacts to imagined fear as if it were real. You feel tense about something that has not arrived. You feel exhausted by something that does not yet exist. If you pause for a moment and ask yourself, right now, in this exact moment, is there any real danger happening? The answer is often no. Yet the mind still grips on to what might happen. Clinging causes us to live in moments that do not exist, a past that is gone, and a future that has not yet come. The present, the only moment we truly live, passes unnoticed. Min began trying something very small. Whenever an old memory appeared, he did not push it away, and he did not drown in it. He simply noticed, "This is a memory," and he allowed it to pass. Whenever worry about the future appeared, he took a deep breath and asked, "Is this happening right now?" That single question was often enough to soften his mind. Letting go does not mean forgetting. It does not mean denying. It does not mean forcing yourself to be strong. Letting go means allowing things to pass instead of holding them in your mind like invisible burdens. Just as the older monk placed the young woman down by the river and kept walking. The question is, what are we still carrying that we could have put down long ago? And if, right now, you loosen just a little, release one memory, release one worry, release one resentment, you may feel a small lightness inside. Sometimes peace does not come from adding something new to your life. It comes from stopping the habit of carrying what is no longer necessary. Pain versus suffering. There are moments in life that hurt so deeply it takes your breath away. A phone call in the middle of the night, an unexpected goodbye, or a test result you were never prepared to hear. None of us can live without going through such things. Pain is part of being human. But there is something subtle we rarely notice. Pain and suffering are not exactly the same. Min understood this one rainy day as he stood outside the hospital after visiting his father. The man who had once been strong was now weakened by illness. Watching him sleep in the hospital bed, Min felt a deep pain, something very real, very human. That pain was not wrong. It did not need fixing. It did not need hiding. But on his way home, his mind began to speak. This shouldn't be happening. Why our family? I'm not ready for this. And in that moment, the pain began to turn into something else, heavier, more persistent, harder to breathe through. That was suffering. Pain is a natural response to loss, illness, separation. Suffering appears when we resist the reality of that pain. We often think pain itself is what makes us suffer, but if we look closely, we see another layer forming behind it. The story the mind builds around the pain. The event happens in reality. The story happens in the mind. Someone speaks a criticism. Reality, sound waves moving through the air. But the mind adds, they don't respect me. I'm not good enough. Everyone must be judging me. From a neutral event, the mind creates an entire world of suffering. Min experienced this when the biggest project of his career failed. When he received the news, the first feeling was simple disappointment, a straightforward sadness. But a few hours later, his mind began working. I'm useless. My career is over. People will lose faith in me. He was no longer hurting because the project failed. He was hurting because of the story he was telling about himself. We rarely realize that most suffering does not come from the event, but from the meaning we assign to it. Someone leaves us. Event, they left. Story, I'm not worthy of love. An opportunity passes. Event, it did not happen. Story, I always fail. A mistake occurs. Event, a mistake happened. Story, I am a mistake. The story keeps the pain alive far longer than the original event. Buddhism teaches that pain is inevitable, but suffering can end. This does not mean becoming numb. It does not mean we are not allowed to be sad, to cry, to feel hurt. It means allowing pain to exist, without adding resistance and stories that make it heavier. Min understood this most clearly one sleepless night. He lay in the dark, his mind replaying past failures. Each memory carried a negative narrative. He felt trapped in an endless loop. Then he tried something different. Instead of arguing with the emotion, he simply breathed and whispered, "This is sadness." No judgment, no resistance. The surprising thing was that the sadness remained, but it no longer suffocated him. It was like rain. When you stand in the rain and fight it, you feel irritated. But when you simply stand still and feel each drop, the rain still falls, yet the tension fades. We often fear painful feelings, so we try to avoid them, staying excessively busy, constantly distracting ourselves, scrolling endlessly, working without rest. But the more we run, the more pain follows. The paradox is that when we stop and allow ourselves to feel pain, it begins to change, not disappearing instantly, but softening, easing, becoming more breathable. You might ask yourself, am I hurting because of what happened, or because of the story I'm telling about it? The moment you recognize that difference, a small space appears. In that space, you are no longer completely swept away by emotion. You begin to see clearly. The event is one thing. The mind's reaction is another. And in that awareness, a gentle kind of freedom appears. Min could not change the fact that his father was aging. He could not change the failures that had happened. He could not avoid loss in life, but he could stop turning those pains into a verdict against himself. When he stopped resisting the pain, he still felt sadness, but he also felt love, gratitude, and life continuing. The pain did not disappear, but suffering no longer filled the entire space inside him. Perhaps this is true for us as well. Pain is part of life. Suffering is what happens when we refuse to accept that part. When we stop fighting pain, we do not become weak. We become honest. We become more human. And in that honesty, a deep peace begins to emerge. Not because life is no longer difficult, but because we are no longer fighting what is inherently human. Sometimes healing is not about removing pain. It is about laying down the fight against it. The Buddha's discovery. Have you ever noticed that even when everything seems fine, the mind still whispers, "Not enough"? You achieve what you wanted, you feel happy for a while, and then a vague sense of lack appears again, as if something is still missing. Min experienced this more clearly than ever after buying his first apartment. He stood in the empty living room, afternoon sunlight pouring through the large glass windows, and felt a deep sense of pride. This was something he had worked for over many years. But just a few weeks later, his mind began to say, "The furniture needs to look better. This apartment is smaller than my colleagues. Maybe I should upgrade in a few years." Before the joy had fully settled, the feeling of not enough had already returned. We often think desire will lead us to happiness, but if we look closely, we see that every desire carries a subtle sense of lack. When we want something, the mind quietly suggests that the present moment is not enough, and that feeling creates a silent tension inside. The Buddha saw this mechanism very clearly. He realized that each time the mind craves, it creates a contraction, a sense of incompleteness, as if we are standing in front of a vending machine, believing the next item will finally satisfy us completely. But once we get it, the satisfaction lasts only briefly, and then the cycle begins again. Min noticed this not only with material things, but with emotions as well. He once believed that when others recognized him, he would feel fulfilled. But each time he received praise, the joy lasted only a short while before the mind began seeking the next validation. What is surprising is that we do not cling only to pleasant things. We also cling to pain. Min realized he often retold the stories of his failures as part of his identity. He would say, "I'm always unlucky," or "I never get good opportunities." These stories became so familiar that he did not notice he was holding them as part of who he believed himself to be. Why do we cling to what hurts us? Because it creates a story about who we are. It gives us an identity. It makes us feel like we understand our lives. We cling to wounds because letting them go means stepping into a new version of ourselves, and that can feel even more frightening. The Buddha recognized that the human mind constantly clings to two things: what is pleasant and what is unpleasant. We crave one and resist the other, yet both keep us trapped. And the most important discovery he made was this: this is not a fixed human nature. It is a habit. A habit repeated so many times that we believe it is who we are. Imagine tightening your shoulder muscles for years. Gradually, you would think that tension is normal. Only when you learn to relax would you realize how long you have been tense. The mind works the same way. Min began observing the moments when he felt restless. He noticed that each time he scrolled through social media, his mind wanted more success, more experiences, more recognition. And instantly, dissatisfaction appeared. But one evening, he sat on his balcony without his phone, without music, just the gentle wind and distant city lights. For the first time in months, he was not trying to achieve anything, not trying to improve anything, not seeking anything. And in that moment, he realized, when he was not chasing anything, a natural peace appeared. Not excitement, not triumph, just a very subtle sense of enoughness. The Buddha described suffering with a simple truth. Suffering arises when we crave reality to be different. We want the present to be more pleasant. We want the past to be different. We want the future to be more certain. Each of those desires creates a gap between us and peace. But what gives hope is this: if it is a habit, it can change. Not by forcing ourselves not to desire, not by abandoning life, but by observing how desire operates. When you clearly see how a magician performs a trick, you are no longer fooled. The trick still happens, but you no longer believe in it the same way. When you begin observing your mind, how it craves, clings, and resists, you slowly realize those stories no longer have the same power. Min still sets goals. He still works. He still dreams. But he no longer believes happiness lies at the destination. He began experiencing life without constantly feeling a sense of lack. Perhaps we do not need to eliminate desire to find peace. Perhaps we simply need to see how desire creates tension and gently smile when we notice it. When we stop demanding that life be different, we do not lose anything. On the contrary, we begin to feel the fullness that was always there. And in that gentle realization, we touch a deep kind of freedom. Freedom from the feeling of not enough that has followed us for so many years. The art of letting go. There was a question Min once feared to face. If I let go, will I lose everything? He used to believe that holding tightly meant loving deeply, that controlling meant being responsible, and that gripping onto everything was the way to protect his life. Perhaps you have thought the same. We are taught to persevere, to fight, to hold on to what matters. So the idea of letting go sounds like giving up, weakness, or even irresponsibility. But if letting go is weakness, why does holding on too tightly leave us so exhausted? Min understood this most clearly in a past relationship. He tried everything to keep the other person from leaving, compromising, sacrificing, changing himself, even accepting things that hurt him. He believed that if he tried hard enough, love could be saved. But the harder he tried to hold on, the more he lost himself. When the relationship finally ended, Min thought he had failed. He believed letting go was a sign of weakness. But months later, looking back, he realized that the most painful part was not the breakup. It was the time he spent clinging to something that was no longer right. Letting go is not giving up. Letting go is recognizing when holding on is hurting you. We often confuse letting go with indifference, but indifference closes the heart. Letting go opens the heart without trying to control the outcome. You can love someone deeply without needing them to fill every emptiness inside you. You can give your best effort without needing the result to be perfect. You can care without controlling. Letting go is not stopping caring. Letting go is stopping the grip. Try clenching your fist tightly for a few minutes. You will feel tension, fatigue, discomfort. When you release it, relief appears immediately. The interesting thing is, you do not lose your hand when you relax it. You simply free it from tension. Life works the same way. Min used to control everything at work. He wanted every detail perfect, every plan on schedule, every person working the way he believed was right. But the more he controlled, the more stressed he became. And paradoxically, the more chaotic things felt. One day, after burning out from pressure, he tried something different. Instead of controlling everything, he began trusting his team more, accepting small mistakes, and focusing on what truly mattered. Not everything became perfect, but he was no longer exhausted. Letting go of control did not cause everything to collapse. It freed energy for what truly mattered. We hold tightly because we believe gripping will protect us from loss. But the truth is, life is always changing. People change. Circumstances change. Nothing can be held forever. When we try to hold on to what is inherently impermanent, We live in fear. When we learn to loosen our grip, we begin to live in freedom. Letting go is not abandoning dreams. It is abandoning despair when dreams do not unfold the way we imagined. Letting go is not stopping love. It is loving without binding others to respond the way we expect. Letting go is not stopping effort. It is striving without losing inner peace. Min realized something simple. Most of his stress did not come from what happened, but from trying to force everything to unfold according to his will. When he began to relax his grip, life did not instantly become easier, but he felt lighter. And that lightness created new space to breathe, to think clearly, to respond instead of reacting impulsively. There is a beautiful image in nature. Water flows around a rock instead of trying to break it. Water is not weak. Water is flexible, and it is precisely that flexibility that makes it powerful in its own way. Letting go is the flexibility of the soul. You no longer have to win every argument. You no longer have to control every outcome. You no longer have to keep everything within your grasp. And something remarkable happens. When you stop trying to control life, you begin to experience it. Min once feared that if he let go, he would lose his sense of security. But what he gained was a new kind of freedom, an inner steadiness, even as the outside world changed. Freedom is not life unfolding perfectly. Freedom is feeling okay, no matter what happens. Perhaps right now you are holding on to something. A worry, a relationship, an expectation, a fear. Try asking yourself, is this grip protecting me or exhausting me? And if you loosen it just a little, what might happen? Sometimes letting go is not losing something. It is the moment we return to ourselves. And in that gentle release, we touch a kind of freedom we did not even realize we had been searching for. Living in the present. There is a very familiar moment. You're eating a warm meal, yet your mind is somewhere else, thinking about an unanswered email, an uncomfortable conversation from this morning, or tomorrow's plans. You swallow the food without really remembering its taste, and then the meal ends. You were there, but you were not truly there. Min realized this one late afternoon while walking home after work. The familiar street, the golden light of the setting sun, the sound of leaves rustling, all of it was there. But when he arrived home, he could not remember what he had just walked past. His mind had been busy with tomorrow's to-do list. He suddenly wondered, did I truly live this afternoon? We spend so much time existing, but very little time truly living. The past exists as memory. The future exists as imagination. Only the present is where life is actually happening. And yet, our minds rarely stay here. While in the present, we replay what has already happened. While living today, we worry about tomorrow. While talking to someone, we think about what we will say next. We live in moments that do not exist and miss the only moment that truly does. Min saw this most clearly during a dinner with his mother. While she talked about the neighbors, he nodded out of habit, eyes still fixed on his phone. When she asked, "Are you listening to me?" he realized he could not remember a single word she had said. That moment made him understand. Presence is a gift, and he had not truly given that gift to someone he loved. We often think we are busy because life moves too fast, but sometimes the greatest busyness happens inside the mind. We worry about a future that has not arrived. We think about things that are already over. We scroll on our phones to fill every silence, and each present moment slips by unnoticed. How many times have you picked up your phone just to check the time, and 20 minutes later, you are still scrolling unconsciously? How many times have you walked into a room, and forgotten why you went there. How many times have you sat beside someone you love while your mind was somewhere else? We do not lack time. We lack presence. Mindfulness is not something mystical. It is not a complicated ritual or distant philosophy. It is simply paying attention to what is happening right now. When you take a sip of water and feel its coolness, when you hear the wind outside the window, when you feel the breath moving in and out, that is presence. Min began trying something very small. Each morning, before opening his phone, he sat quietly for 1 minute and felt his breath. At first, his mind ran everywhere, but after a few days, he noticed his mornings felt lighter, not because life had changed, but because he had truly stepped into the day instead of rushing into it. One evening, while washing dishes, he tried simply washing dishes. No podcast, no phone, no thinking about work. He felt the water running over his hands, the sound of plates touching, the simple, repeated motion. What seemed boring became peaceful. We often search for grand experiences to feel alive, but life is present in the smallest moments. A gentle breeze, a warm cup of tea, a fleeting smile, a deep breath. The present is not loud, it is quiet, and because of that, we easily miss it. The mind likes the past because it feels familiar. It likes the future because it feels in control. But the present requires us to release both, and that makes the mind uncomfortable. So we fill every space with noise. But when we are brave enough to stay in this moment, we begin to notice something strange. Most of our worries do not exist here. Right now, you are safe. Right now, you are breathing. Right now, life is happening. Min once believed he would be happy when he reached big goals in the future. But he began to realize that life does not happen in the future. It happens in the small moments passing each day. If we miss the present, we miss life. This does not mean we stop planning for the future or remembering the past. We can still do those things, but instead of living inside them, we return to the present, the only place where we can truly experience life. Try pausing for a few seconds. Feel your breath. Listen to the sounds around you. Notice your body sitting here. There is nothing to change, nothing to achieve. Just be here. In that simple moment, you may feel a very gentle stillness, as if life is no longer rushing. Perhaps peace is not about slowing down the world. Perhaps it is about truly showing up in the world that is already unfolding. And when we begin to live in the present, we realize life is not passing too quickly. It is just that before, we were not truly there to live it. Peace in imperfection. There is an old ceramic bowl sitting on the kitchen shelf in Min's home. Its rim is chipped slightly, and the glaze has faded over the years. If placed beside brand new sets of dishes, it does not look perfect. But every time Min holds that bowl, he remembers his childhood, family meals together, his mother's laughter, and a sense of safety he cannot buy with anything. The strange thing is, the chip is what makes the bowl more precious. We grow up in a world that glorifies perfection. Edited images on social media, success polished and highlighted, life retold as a series of flawless moments. Gradually, we begin to believe we are only worthy of love when everything in our lives becomes perfect. But if we look deeper, we see a simple truth. Nothing in life is perfect, and nothing lasts forever. Everything changes. Our bodies change, relationships change, success comes and goes. The things we love are impermanent. At first, this idea may make us anxious, but from another perspective, impermanence brings hope. If everything changes, then pain also changes. If nothing lasts forever, then present difficulties will not last forever either. There was a period when Min felt his life was not going in the right direction. His career felt unstable. His relationship was strained. His friends seemed to be moving further ahead than he was. He looked at his life as if it were a draft full of mistakes. He asked himself, why isn't my life smooth like everyone else's? But years later, when he looked back, it was those imperfect periods that shaped who he became. Failures taught him patience. Hurt taught him compassion. Starting over taught him courage. The cracks did not break him. They expanded him. The Japanese have a beautiful philosophy called wabi-sabi, the beauty of imperfection, incompleteness, and impermanence. They repair broken pottery with gold, highlighting the cracks instead of hiding them. The fractures become part of the beauty, not something to conceal. Imagine if we viewed our lives that way. Mistakes are not stains. They are golden lines telling a story of growth. Wounds are not signs of weakness. They are proof that we have loved. Failures are not endings. They are turns in the journey. Min remembers once declining a new project because he feared he was not good enough. He waited for the perfect moment when he would feel completely ready. That moment never came. Eventually, he realized, no one ever feels completely ready. Perfection is not a requirement to begin. It is an illusion that makes us postpone life. When he dared to step into imperfection, he learned more than any course could have taught him. We often think that when everything becomes perfect, we will finally feel peace. But if perfection does not exist, are we postponing our peace indefinitely? Life does not wait for us to become perfect. It unfolds in the messiness, the incompleteness, the unfinished moments. A room not entirely tidy, but filled with laughter. A simple meal that is warm. A flawed human being who is sincere. That is where real life exists. When we accept our own imperfection, we begin to accept the imperfection of others. We become less harsh, less judgmental, less burdened by unrealistic expectations. And something strange happens. Relationships become lighter. Min once believed he needed to become a better version of himself before he deserved love. But he realized that accepting his own imperfection allowed him to connect more authentically with others. No one needs a perfect person. They need a real one. Difficulties in life are not signs you are on the wrong path. They are part of the path. A sword does not become strong by staying in a glass case. It is forged through fire and pressure. We are the same. Challenges do not weaken us. They shape a strength within us that we did not know we had. If everything in your life right now is not perfect, perhaps it is not a problem that needs fixing. Perhaps it is simply life unfolding. And if you pause for a moment, look at the cracks in your own journey. The mistakes, the restarts, the emotional scars. You may realize they are not merely signs of suffering. They are proof that you have lived. Perhaps peace does not come when life becomes perfect. Perhaps peace appears when we stop demanding perfection. Like the chipped bowl on the kitchen shelf, no longer flawless, yet holding a beauty that perfection could never offer. And when we begin to see our lives that way, we no longer see cracks. We see a story. Practicing acceptance. There are days when everything seems to turn against you at once. You wake up late, get stuck in traffic, an urgent email appears the moment you arrive at work, and before you can even breathe, the whole day already feels heavy. Min once had a morning like that. It suddenly started raining. The shirt he had just ironed was splashed with dirty water from a passing car, and when he reached the office, he discovered that an important presentation had a data error. In that moment, he felt as if everything was working against him. But what exhausted him was not what happened. It was his reaction to it. This can't get any worse. Why does this always happen to me? Today is definitely going to be a disaster. Within minutes, his mind had turned an inconvenient morning into a terrible day. Buddhism offers a powerful image to describe this. Life shoots the first arrow, and we shoot the second. The first arrow is unavoidable pain. The rain falls, plans change, words hurt, the body feels tired. The second arrow is our reaction. Resistance, complaining, self-blame, exaggerating the story. The first arrow causes pain. The second arrow causes suffering. And the important thing is this: the second arrow is shot by us. Acceptance is not an emotion that suddenly appears one day. It is a practice, a choice repeated in the small moments of daily life. Min did not understand this immediately. He once believed acceptance meant feeling calm the moment something difficult happened. When he failed to do that, he thought he had failed altogether. But then he realized acceptance is not about not feeling discomfort. Acceptance is about not turning discomfort into an inner battle. One day, while standing in line at the supermarket, he found himself behind a customer arguing endlessly with the cashier. The people behind him grew restless. Min felt irritation rising. Normally, he would sigh, check his watch, grow frustrated. But that time, he tried something different. He paused, just for a few seconds. He noticed his shoulders were tense. He relaxed them. He took a deep breath. He looked around. The bright supermarket lights, the sound of children laughing, the smell of freshly baked bread from a nearby counter. The irritation did not disappear, but it no longer occupied his entire mind. That small pause changed his experience. The space between event and reaction is where freedom lives. We react so quickly that we forget we have a choice. Someone says something hurtful, leads to immediate reaction. Plans change, leads to immediate stress. A mistake happens, leads to immediate self-blame. But between the event and the reaction, there is always a small space. In that space, we can choose. Acceptance begins with noticing that space. Min started practicing something simple. Whenever something did not go as expected, he paused for a few seconds and asked himself, "Can I change this right now?" If the answer was yes, he acted. If the answer was no, he exhaled and accepted. At first, this did not feel natural. The mind still wanted to react, to control, to resist. But over time, that small pause became familiar. Once, his flight was delayed for hours. Around him, passengers were angry. Airline staff were being questioned constantly. Min felt irritation rising. Then he remembered his familiar question. Can I change this right now? No. He found a quiet seat, bought a cup of hot tea, and opened a book he had not read in a long time. The flight was still delayed, but his experience was completely different. Acceptance does not change the circumstance. It changes how we experience the circumstance. This does not mean accepting injustice or stopping efforts to improve life. If your house is on fire, you do not sit there accepting, you act. But most of what we resist daily is not a burning house. It is simply life unfolding, weather shifting, people being different, plans being imperfect. We spend energy fighting what we cannot control, and we exhaust ourselves doing so. When we accept what cannot be changed, that energy returns to us. We can use it to care for ourselves, to think more clearly, and to act more effectively. Min realized acceptance did not make him weaker. It made him calmer in tense situations. He was no longer swept away by immediate reactions. He had space to choose how to respond. And in that space, he found freedom. Perhaps today something will not go your way. A plan changes. A harsh word is spoken. A small mistake happens. When it does, try pausing for a few seconds. Take a deep breath. Ask yourself, can I change this right now? If yes, act. If no, relax your shoulders and allow this moment to be exactly as it is. That is all. Acceptance is not a destination. It is a moment-by-moment practice. You will forget. You will react. You will tense up again. And then you remember and return. Each time you return, you are practicing freedom. Not freedom from difficulty, but freedom from the inner war within yourself. And in that very small release, you may realize peace does not come from controlling life. It comes from no longer fighting it. What acceptance brings. One evening, Min was sitting in his car in the middle of what felt like endless traffic. The red light ahead seemed like it would never turn green. Car horns echoed continuously. The person next to him sighed. Someone angrily stepped out of their vehicle. In the past, Min would have felt the same irritation, heart beating faster, shoulders tightening, mind complaining that he was wasting time. But that evening, he leaned back into his seat, exhaled slowly, and watched the lights reflecting on the rain-soaked road. The line of cars remained still. Yet inside him, something became quiet. The circumstances did not change. The experience did. That was when Min realized acceptance does not make life perfect. It makes our experience of life lighter. Before, he spent enormous energy resisting small inconveniences, traffic jams, changed plans, urgent emails, careless words. Each irritated reaction was like a small wave, but together they left him exhausted by the end of the day. We often think we are tired because of work, responsibilities, busy schedules. But many times, what drains us most is the constant inner battle with reality. When we resist what is happening, we consume energy. When we accept, that energy returns. Min began noticing that situations which once stressed him no longer occupied his entire mind. When plans changed, he adjusted instead of panicking. When someone spoke harshly, he listened and let it pass instead of carrying it all day. Not because he became indifferent, but because he no longer allowed everything to carry him away. Acceptance does not remove emotion. It softens the intensity of reaction. A tense meeting at work once caused Min to lose sleep for nights. He replayed every sentence in his head, blamed himself, worried about others' judgments. But after practicing acceptance, he started seeing those situations differently. He still prepared carefully, still did his job well. But when the meeting ended, he no longer carried it home in his mind. His evening became evening again. Have you ever noticed that a conversation has ended, yet you continue it in your head for hours? Acceptance helps us place the period at the right time. When we stop resisting reality, the mind becomes calmer. And when the mind is calm, we respond more wisely. Once, a team member made a mistake that delayed a project. In the past, Min might have reacted immediately in frustration. But that time, he paused, breathed deeply, and looked at the whole situation. He realized anger would not solve the problem. Calmness would. When he spoke in a steady tone, the team focused on solutions instead of becoming defensive. Acceptance does not weaken us. It makes us more effective. When we are not dragged by emotion, we can see clearly. And surprisingly, life begins to feel lighter. not because problems disappear, but because we stop carrying them longer than necessary. Min realized he used to bring work into his sleep, stress into his meals, worry into moments that could have been peaceful. When he learned to put things down at the right time, ordinary moments became vivid again. The taste of morning coffee, the sound of rain on the roof, a simple conversation with a loved one. Life did not change. He began truly living in it. The deepest gift acceptance brought was not ease, but a kind of peace that does not depend on circumstances. Before, Min believed he would feel peaceful when everything was stable, work going smoothly, finances secure, relationships harmonious. But life is rarely stable for long. If peace depends on circumstances, it will always be fragile. But when peace comes from within, from no longer resisting reality, it becomes steadier. You still face challenges. You still experience change. You still encounter difficulty. But inside, you are no longer swept away as before. Like a lake, when the wind stops blowing, the water becomes still and reflects the sky more clearly. Acceptance does not reduce the storms of life. It calms the waters within you. Perhaps you are still waiting for the day everything becomes perfect before you allow yourself to feel peace. But if that day never comes, will you miss the peace that could exist right now? Min once thought he needed to change his circumstances to feel lighter, but he realized what brought lightness was not changing the circumstances. It was changing how he met them. When we stop fighting life, life no longer feels like a battle. It becomes a current we can walk with. And within that current, we discover a simple truth. Peace does not come when everything goes our way, but when we no longer need it to. In that lightness, life is no longer a burden to endure. It becomes a journey to experience. Perhaps you do not realize how tired you have been. Not tired because of life itself, but tired from trying to keep everything from changing. Tired from trying to be strong. Tired from trying to control. Tired from trying to become a perfect version of yourself. And perhaps you have become so used to tension that you have forgotten what lightness feels like. If this speaks to you, pause for a moment. There is nothing to fix right now, nothing more to achieve. Just breathe. Peace is not found in controlling life. There was a night Min lay awake simply because an email had not been answered. He reread what he had sent, wondering if he had written something wrong, if the recipient misunderstood, if it would affect an upcoming opportunity. Nothing was actually happening in that dark room, yet his mind was trying to control a future that did not exist. Does that feeling sound familiar? We spend enormous energy trying to control what has not yet happened. Work results, other people's thoughts, how things will unfold, our reputation in the eyes of others, even how life itself should operate. We believe that if we control well enough, we will be safe. If we prepare thoroughly enough, we will avoid failure. If we do everything right, we will avoid being hurt. But life does not run on guaranteed contracts. Min once believed that if he worked hard enough, everything would go according to plan. But a major project was suddenly canceled for reasons beyond his control. It felt as if all his effort had been swept away by a short notification. For weeks afterward, he was not just disappointed, he was haunted by one question. How could I have prevented this? That question trapped him. We often think worrying helps us control the future, but worry controls nothing. It only makes the present heavier. The more we try to control, the more anxious we become. The tighter we hold, the more afraid we are of losing. Think about a relationship you tried to hold tightly. You wanted the other person to always understand you, always respond the right way, always be there when you needed them. But the tighter you held, the more you feared they would change. That fear does not come from loss itself. It comes from knowing, deep down, that you cannot control another human being. Min experienced this. When his former partner began shifting priorities in life, he tried to keep everything the same. He wanted to preserve the familiar sense of security. But the harder he tried, the more insecure he felt. Only when he accepted that people change, that nothing stays still forever, did he begin to breathe normally again. We fear change because it makes us feel out of control. But the truth is, life is always changing, whether we accept it or not. Plans may fall apart, people may leave, opportunities may disappear. The future is always uncertain. When we resist this truth, we live in constant tension. When we accept it, a deep relief appears. Min remembers a time when his flight was canceled at the last minute. Around him, passengers argued, grew frustrated, desperately tried to alter the situation. Min felt disappointment too, but after a few minutes, he realized no complaint could change the weather or the schedule. He sat down, called the person who was supposed to pick him up, and found a quiet corner to read. The flight was still canceled, but his evening was not. Relief did not come because the situation became certain. It came because he no longer needed it to be certain. We often believe peace will arrive when everything stabilizes, but if you observe life long enough, you will see complete stability does not exist. Even the things we believe are solid change over time. If peace depends on certainty, we will live in insecurity. But when we accept life's uncertainty, something strange happens. We no longer fear change as we once did. This does not mean we stop planning. We still prepare, still strive, still set goals. But we no longer demand that life follow our blueprint. Min began seeing life like a river. Before, he tried to swim upstream, trying to control the direction of the water, trying to force everything his way. It exhausted him. When he learned to flow with the current, he did not lose direction. He simply stopped fighting the water. The river still moved. He still moved. But there was no longer resistance. Perhaps right now, you are trying to hold on to something. A result, a relationship, an image of the future, a version of life you believe is right. Ask yourself, is this need to control bringing peace or feeding anxiety? We cannot control everything that happens, but we can choose how we meet what happens. When we stop trying to control the flow of life, we do not become powerless. We become flexible, and in that flexibility, we discover a new kind of peace, one that does not depend on everything going our way. Peace does not come when the future becomes certain. Peace comes when we no longer require the future to be certain. Like someone learning to relax while floating on water, not because the water stops moving, but because they no longer fear the current. And when the fear settles, we realize life is not something to control, it is something to experience. True freedom is freedom from the stories in the mind. One evening, Min sat alone after work, replaying the morning meeting in his head. No one had said anything particularly harsh. No one had directly criticized him. Yet for hours afterward, one familiar sentence echoed inside. They don't respect me. No one actually said that, but he heard it inside his own mind. Have you ever experienced something similar? Someone does not reply to a message. They are ignoring me. An opportunity slips away. I always fail. Someone seems distant. No one truly cares about me. The event lasts a few seconds, but the story in the mind can last hours, even years. Min began to see that most of his suffering did not come from events themselves, but from the stories he told about them. When a project failed, the reality was simple. The project did not succeed. But the story in his head said, "I am not competent enough." When a friend did not call back, the reality was simple. They were busy. But the story said, "I am not important to them." These stories repeated so often that they became truth in his mind. And what is striking is this: we rarely question them. The mind is like a tireless storyteller. It tries to create meaning for everything that happens. That helps us understand the world. But sometimes, those stories do not reflect reality. They reflect fear, memory, and old beliefs. Min realized he had carried a story since his school years. "I'm not good enough." Every small failure at work reinforced that story. Every small mistake became evidence. Not because the story was true, but because he had grown used to believing it. We often live inside old stories without realizing we are living inside them. "I'm always unlucky." "No one truly understands me." "I never succeed." These are not events. They are interpretations. And the danger is that when we believe them completely, they begin to shape how we see the world. If you believe others do not respect you, you will see signs of disrespect everywhere. If you believe you always fail, you will overlook small successes. If you believe life is unfair, you will only notice injustice, not because the world is that way, but because the mind filters reality through a familiar story. One day, sitting in a cafe, Min heard laughter from a nearby table. For a brief moment, he thought they were laughing at him. Then he paused. He asked himself, "Am I sure that's true?" That moment felt like light entering a dark room. He realized it was only a thought, not a fact. When he stopped instantly believing the thought, the discomfort faded. The thought still appeared, but it no longer held power. We often think freedom means the absence of difficulty, but freedom is much deeper. Freedom is not being controlled by every thought that appears in the mind. Thoughts are like clouds passing through the sky. In the past, Min tried to grab them or push them away, but when he learned to simply observe, he realized the sky is not affected by the clouds. Thoughts come and go. The sky remains. When we step back and observe the mind, we begin to understand. Not every thought needs to be believed. A thought says, "I'm not good enough." You can respond, "That is a thought, not a fact." A thought says, "Everything will fail." You can respond, "That is fear speaking." The moment you see the thought instead of being pulled by it, a space of freedom appears. Min still has negative thoughts. They did not disappear, but they no longer define him as they once did. He can hear them without following them. This does not make life perfect, but it makes life lighter. You still face challenges. You still encounter difficulty, but you no longer live inside a prison built by the stories in your head. Try recalling a thought that troubled you recently. Ask yourself, is this absolute truth or just a story my mind is telling? The moment you ask that question, you step outside the story. And in that small space, you touch freedom. Not freedom from challenge, but freedom from believing every thought is truth. Min realized the outside world did not change much, but his inner world became more spacious. Thoughts still come, emotions still arise, but they are no longer prison walls. They are just clouds passing through. And when you are no longer carried away by every story your mind creates, you begin to experience life more directly. not through the filter of fear, memory, or old beliefs. Perhaps freedom is not about eliminating all thoughts. Perhaps freedom is realizing you are not those thoughts. And when you are no longer controlled by the stories in your head, you step out of the invisible prison you have lived in for years. Outside that prison, life continues, but for the first time, you are truly present in it. Perhaps right now, you are carrying a story about yourself, that you are not good enough, that you have missed too many opportunities, that you have made too many mistakes to begin again. And you have heard that story so long that you forgot. It is only a story, not a sentence, not fate, just an old voice in the mind. Imagine if, in this moment, you put that story down. You are no longer the failure, no longer the wounded one, no longer the one who isn't enough. You are simply a human being, living. And in that simplicity, a door of freedom opens. Perhaps for the first time in a long while, you are sitting here without needing to run forward. No need to fix everything. No need to understand everything. No need to become someone else. Just be here. And in that small stillness, you may feel something we rarely allow ourselves to experience. A moment without pressure, without expectation, without resistance, just presence. Conclusion. Perhaps right now you are sitting here, listening to these final words and wondering, after everything that has been said, where is happiness truly found? We have grown used to believing that happiness is a destination. When we achieve what we want, when everything becomes stable, when life gets easier, then we will be happy. And so, we keep running towards success, recognition, security, and an imagined future where everything finally feels enough. But if you pause for a moment and look back on your journey, you may realize something. Each time you achieved what you once desired, the joy stayed only briefly. And then the mind moved on to the next thing. Not because you are greedy, but because you were taught that happiness lies ahead. Min lived many years with that belief. He thought that when his career became stable, he would feel peaceful. When his finances were secure, he would feel relieved. When everything went according to plan, he would finally feel fulfilled. But life never stayed still long enough for him to feel completely safe. Only when he stopped waiting for everything to be perfect did he begin to notice something he had overlooked before. Peace does not come when life becomes easy. It comes when he stops resisting what is happening. Happiness is not getting everything we want. Happiness is letting go of the attachment that everything must go our way. When we release attachment, the mind no longer remains in constant tension. When we stop resisting reality, our energy is no longer consumed by an invisible battle. When we live fully in the present, life becomes more vivid. When we accept impermanence and imperfection, the fear of loss begins to fade. Min once thought letting go would take away his motivation. But the opposite happened. When he was no longer driven by fear, he worked with greater clarity. When he stopped trying to control everything, he connected more sincerely. When he stopped trying to be perfect, he felt freer. Life still has challenges, still has change, still has loss, but he no longer lives in constant resistance. And in that absence of resistance, a quiet space appears. Not the quiet of emptiness, but the quiet of peace. You may not recognize this immediately. The mind is used to running, fixing, controlling, searching. Stopping can feel unfamiliar. But if you pause right now, just for a few seconds, and allow this moment to be exactly as it is, not better, not different, not perfect, you may feel a very subtle lightness arise. Peace is not something we create. It appears when we stop creating resistance, like the sky that is always there behind the clouds. When the clouds part, the sky does not need to be created. It is simply revealed. Peace is the same. It is not in the future, not in the next achievement, not in a perfected version of life. It is here, in this very moment, when you stop fighting reality. Perhaps tomorrow you will forget. You will worry again, resist again, try to control again. That is completely human. This journey is not about becoming perfect. It is about returning, again and again, to acceptance, to presence, to gentleness. And each time you return, you step closer to the peace that has always been there. Somewhere out there, someone else may be exhausted from the battle inside their own mind. They may not speak about it. They may still smile each day, but inside, they are tired. And perhaps one timely message is enough to help them breathe a little easier. If today's sharing touched you in any way, take a quiet moment to listen inward. What in your life can you begin to loosen? What can you stop resisting? What is this present moment inviting you to experience? If you feel this video might help someone who is tired of their inner battle, you can share it with them. And if you wish to continue exploring teachings that nurture inner peace and deeper living each day, follow the channel Buddhist Teachings Audio to receive the newest videos. Your presence here, listening until these final moments, is already something precious. Thank you for giving time to yourself, to your peace, and to this gentle journey of awakening. Step into the rest of your day with a slower breath, a lighter mind, and a more open heart. Because when you stop fighting life, you begin to realize peace has never left you. It is still here, in this very moment.